She meant to send it to her best friend. That's the thing everyone needs to understand. Maya Johnson was lying in bed at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, wine-drunk and giggling, typing out the most embarrassingly detailed fantasy she'd ever put into words. It was supposed to be a joke, a ridiculous, over-the-top description of the gorgeous Korean man she'd been secretly obsessing over for months, the mysterious CEO who owned the building where she worked. The man with the cold eyes and the perfectly tailored suits who looked at everyone like they were insects beneath his notice. She typed every shameful detail, what she wanted him to do, what she imagined he looked like beneath those expensive clothes, how she pictured his voice would sound whispering commands in her ear, and then, still laughing, still absolutely certain she was sending it to her friend Keisha, she hit send. The reply came exactly 4 minutes later. It was not from Keisha. It was from an unknown number, which made no sense because she hadn't texted an unknown number. The message contained only 3 words that made her blood freeze solid in her veins. "Don't move, coming." Maya stared at her phone in horror. Then she scrolled up and saw the contact name her drunk fingers had selected. Not Keisha, not even close, Kang Jun-seo. The Korean Mafia boss whose number she'd stolen from her manager's phone 3 weeks ago, telling herself she just wanted it for emergencies. The man who controlled half of Chicago from the shadows. The man she just sent the filthiest, most explicit fantasy of her entire life, and he wasn't waiting until morning to find her. The phone slipped from Maya's trembling fingers and landed on her comforter with a soft thump. She stared at it like it had transformed into a venomous snake, her wine-pleasant buzz evaporating into cold, sharp terror. This wasn't happening. This could not be happening. She grabbed the phone again, scrolling up with shaking hands, desperately hoping she had misread the contact name. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe there was another Kang in her phone. Maybe no, there it was, Kang Jun-seo, complete with the little note she'd added beneath his name like an absolute fool: "Do not contact, dangerous." And beneath that contact header in damning black and white was every filthy word she had typed. Maya read it back with growing horror. She had described his hands, in detail, what she imagined they would feel like, gripping her hips, her throat, her hair. She had written about his voice, that cold, controlled voice she had only heard once when he visited the building, and how she fantasized about hearing it break with desire. She had confessed to watching him from the 20th floor windows whenever his black SUV pulled up to the entrance. She had admitted to stealing his number. She had described in explicit terms that made her want to die of embarrassment exactly what she wanted him to do to her in his office, against the floor-to-ceiling windows, where anyone in the city could look up and see. And at the end, the worst part, the part that made her seriously consider fleeing the country. "I know you'd never look twice at someone like me, but a girl can dream, right? Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God." She had sent that to him, to the actual Kang Jun-seo, the man who, according to every whispered rumor in the building, had people killed for looking at him wrong, and he had replied, "Don't move, coming." What did that mean? Was he coming to kill her? Was he sending someone to kill her? Was this some kind of mafia protocol for dealing with people who disrespected him? Maya leaped out of bed, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She was wearing an old college t-shirt and underwear. Not exactly the outfit for either seduction or fleeing for her life. She needed to run. That was the smart thing. Pack a bag, get in her car, drive until she hit the ocean. Change her name, start a new life selling seashells on a beach somewhere. But even as she thought it, she knew she wasn't going to run, partly because she was frozen with fear, partly because running from a man like Kang Jun-seo seemed like a good way to make things worse. But mostly, and this was the part she couldn't explain even to herself, because something deep in her chest had ignited at those 3 words. "Don't move, coming." Not "never contact me again." Not "I'm calling the police." Not even "who is this?" Just the command to stay exactly where she was and the promise that he was on his way. Maya's phone buzzed again. Unknown number, address. She stared at the message. He was asking where she lived, which meant he didn't already know, which meant she still had a choice. She could give him a fake address. She could not respond at all. She could. Her fingers were typing before her brain caught up. She sent her address. Then she sat on the edge of her bed and wondered what the hell she had just done. 23 minutes. That's how long it took for the knock to come. Maya had spent those 23 minutes in a state of panic that cycled through several distinct phases. First, the desperate cleaning phase, where she tried to make her small apartment look less like the home of a woman who had given up on having guests. Then the outfit crisis phase, where she changed clothes 4 times before realizing that nothing she owned was appropriate for either being murdered or being seduced by a crime lord. She settled on jeans and a simple black top, then immediately felt ridiculous for caring what she looked like. Then came the questioning her sanity phase. What was she doing? Why had she sent her address? Why wasn't she calling the police? Why was some twisted part of her excited instead of terrified? And finally, the resignation phase. Whatever was about to happen, she had set it in motion. She had stolen his number. She had written those words. She had hit send. The consequences, whatever they were, belonged to her. The knock was sharp, 3 precise raps that somehow managed to sound both polite and threatening. Maya walked to the door on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. She didn't look through the peephole. She didn't ask who it was. She simply opened the door, and there he was. Kang Jun-seo was even more devastating up close than he was from 20 floors up. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained against his dark suit jacket. His face was all sharp angles and cold perfection, cheekbones that could cut glass, a jaw that looked carved from marble. His black hair was swept back from his forehead, not a strand out of place despite the late hour and whatever journey had brought him here. But it was his eyes that pinned her in place, dark, almost black, and absolutely unreadable. They swept over her from head to toe, a slow assessment that made her feel simultaneously exposed and seen in a way she had never experienced before. Maya Johnson, he said, his voice, low and smooth, with just a hint of an accent that curved around her name like a caress. Mr. Kang, she managed. Her voice came out steadier than she expected, which was a small miracle. I can explain, can you? He stepped forward and she stepped back automatically, and then he was inside her apartment and closing the door behind him, and she was suddenly very aware of how small her living room was and how much space he occupied just by existing. It was a mistake, she said quickly. I meant to send that text to someone else. My friend, it was a joke. I never meant for you to. You never meant for me to know that you've been watching me from your office window. He moved further into the room, his eyes never leaving her face. That you stole my personal number, that you lie in bed at night imagining my hands on your body. Each word was precise, clinical, like he was reading from a report. Maya's face burned with humiliation. I know it was wrong. I know I crossed a line. I'll resign first thing tomorrow. You'll never have to see me again. I'm so sorry. Stop. The single word cut through her, rambling like a blade. She stopped. Jun-seo studied her for a long moment. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension and something else she couldn't identify. You think I came here at midnight to accept your resignation? Maya blinked. What? You describe in considerable detail, wanting me to press you against the windows of my office. You confess to weeks of watching me, wanting me, thinking about me, and you believe my response to such a message would be to wait for a formal resignation letter. His tone was impossible to read. She couldn't tell if he was angry, amused, or something else entirely. I don't know what I thought, she admitted. I don't know what you want. No, he moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her head spin. Then perhaps you should read your message again. You seemed quite certain about what I would want to do to you. Oh God, he was quoting her. He was standing in her apartment at midnight quoting the filthiest text she had ever written. That was fantasy, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You didn't think it would become reality. He reached out and her breath caught, but he only touched a strand of her hair, rubbing it between his fingers like he was testing the texture. You didn't think I would read your words and wonder if the woman who wrote them tastes as bold as she writes. Maya's knees actually went weak. She had to lock them to keep from swaying. Mr. Kang Jun-seo, his eyes met hers. If you're going to send me messages about what you want me to do to you, you should at least use my name. Jun-seo, the name felt forbidden on her tongue. I don't understand. Why are you here? Because I don't wait for things I want. His hand moved from her hair to her jaw, cupping it with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the intensity in his eyes. Because I have received hundreds of messages from people who want my attention, my money, my power, but never one like yours. One that was embarrassingly explicit and sent by accident. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, the first crack in his cold facade, one that was honest, raw, written by someone who had no intention of me ever seeing it, no agenda, no manipulation, just desire, pure and unfiltered. He leaned closer and Maya forgot how to breathe. Do you know how rare that is in my world? How long it has been since someone wanted me, not my empire? Maya's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. I didn't think you would. What, notice you? His thumb traced her lower lip, a feather-light touch that sent electricity sparking through her entire body. I noticed you the first week you started working in my building, the woman who smiled at the janitors, who brought coffee for the security guards, who looked at me from across the lobby like she was seeing through every wall I had built. You noticed me? I notice everything. His voice dropped lower. I noticed when you started watching me from the 20th floor. I noticed when you began timing your elevator trips to coincide with my arrivals. I noticed the way you blushed whenever our eyes met across the lobby. Maya felt like the floor had tilted beneath her feet. He had known. This whole time he had known she was watching him, and he had been watching her right back. Why didn't you say anything? Because you were afraid of me. I could see it in the way you held yourself, ready to run at any moment. I don't pursue people who are afraid. His eyes darkened. But you're not afraid now, are you, Maya? She should be. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that she should be terrified. This man was dangerous, powerful, capable of things she couldn't even imagine. But when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see a monster. She saw hunger, carefully controlled, ruthlessly contained, but unmistakable. The same hunger she had felt for months reflected back at her from the depths of his gaze. No, she heard herself say, I'm not afraid. Something shifted in his expression, something cracked, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like she had imagined. It was better. His lips were firm, demanding, taking control of the kiss with a confidence that made her melt against him. His hand slid from her jaw into her hair, gripping it firmly, tilting her head back to give him better access. his other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him until there was no space between their bodies. Maya had been kissed before. She had dated, had relationships, had experiences she thought were passionate. This was something else entirely. This was consumption, possession. A claiming that went beyond the physical and touched something deep in her soul. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. His eyes were wild, the careful control slipping, revealing something raw and desperate beneath. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice rough. "Tell me you've changed your mind. Tell me this was a mistake." "It was a mistake," Maya whispered. "The best mistake I've ever made." His control snapped. He kissed her again, harder this time, walking her backward until her back hit the wall. His body pressed against hers, all hard muscle and heat, and she could feel exactly how affected he was by this encounter. "The things you wrote," he murmured against her mouth. "The things you imagined, do you want them to be real?" "Yes, even knowing what I am, even knowing the world I live in. Yes." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, searching for something. Whatever he found there made his expression soften almost imperceptibly. "You don't know what you're agreeing to, then show me." Those two words sealed her fate. What followed was a night that rewrote everything Maya thought she knew about desire. Junseo was exactly what she had imagined and nothing like she had expected. He was demanding but attentive, rough but careful, taking control while somehow making her feel like the center of his entire universe. He made her repeat parts of her text out loud, watching her face flush with embarrassment and desire as she spoke her fantasies into the space between them. Then he made every single one of them come true, against the wall, on the floor, in her small kitchen where he lifted her onto the counter like she weighed nothing, in her bedroom where he spent what felt like hours learning every inch of her body. He was insatiable, relentless. Every time she thought she couldn't possibly take any more, he would give her exactly what she needed to tip over the edge again. And when it was finally over, when they lay tangled together in her disheveled bed as the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows, he didn't get up to leave. Instead, he pulled her closer, tucking her against his chest like she belonged there. "What happens now?" Maya asked, her voice hoarse from the night's activities. "Now you sleep." His hands stroked lazy patterns on her back. "We'll figure out the rest later." "The rest? Did you think this was a one-time occurrence?" He tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. "I told you I don't wait for things I want, and I don't let them go once I have them. I'm not a thing. No, you're much more dangerous than that." His lips brushed her forehead. "You're the woman who broke through every wall I built with a single accidental text message. That makes you the most valuable thing in my world." Maya should have been frightened by the intensity in his voice, by the implications of what he was saying, by the reality of who and what he was. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Safe, seen, wanted. "What about your world?" she asked quietly. "The things you do, the danger you live in, where do I fit in that? Wherever you want to fit." His voice was serious now, the teasing edge gone. "I won't lie to you, Maya. My life is complicated. There are people who want me dead. Rivals who would use anything to hurt me, including you if they knew what you meant to me." "What do I mean to you? We just met. Really met, I mean. How can you possibly know?" "I know." He cut her off gently but firmly. "I've watched you for months, learned everything I could about you, told myself to stay away because you deserved better than a man like me. But then you sent that message, and all my careful restraint meant nothing. So what? Now I'm your girlfriend, your mistress. What's the protocol for accidentally sexting a crime lord?" Despite the gravity of the conversation, Junseo laughed, an actual laugh, warm and surprised, like he hadn't expected to make that sound. "There is no protocol. This situation is unprecedented." He kissed her softly. "We make our own rules. We go at whatever pace feels right, and you decide every step of the way how deep you want to go into my world, and if I decide I want out." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Then I let you go, no matter how much it destroys me." Maya studied his face in the growing light, searching for the lie, the manipulation, the hidden agenda. She found nothing but raw honesty and a vulnerability that he was clearly unused to showing. "Okay," she said finally. Okay, let's see where this goes." She settled back against his chest. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "First, no keeping me in the dark. If I'm going to be part of your life, I need to know what I'm dealing with. Not every detail, but enough to understand what I'm walking into." "Agreed." "Second, I keep my job, my independence. I'm not going to become some kept woman who depends on you for everything. I would expect nothing less." And third, she looked up at him with a hint of the boldness that had got her into this situation. "You have to take me to dinner, properly, like a normal person. I want to know who Kang Jun-seo is when he's not being terrifying." Another soft laugh. "You drive a hard bargain. Take it or leave it." "I'll take it." He kissed her again, slower this time, filled with promise rather than urgency. "All of it, all of you." They slept eventually, tangled together as the sun rose over Chicago, two people whose worlds had collided in the most unexpected way possible. But if Maya thought the complications were over, she was badly mistaken. They were just beginning. The first sign that her life had fundamentally changed came 3 days later. Maya had returned to work after taking a sick day, not technically a lie, considering she had been thoroughly exhausted from the night with Jun-seo and was trying to focus on her job as a marketing coordinator when she noticed people staring, not unusual staring. In a building full of people, there were always glances and looks. This was different. whispers cut off abruptly when she walked by. Coworkers who had always been friendly suddenly seemed nervous around her. Even her manager, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia who had never shown fear of anyone, treated her with unusual deference. It wasn't until lunch that she got an explanation. "So," Keisha said, dropping into the seat across from Maya in the cafeteria, "when exactly were you planning to tell me you're sleeping with Kang Jun-seo?" Maya nearly choked on her sandwich. "What? How do I know?" "Girl, everyone knows. There's a picture on some gossip site. You and him getting into his car outside your apartment building yesterday morning." Keisha pulled out her phone and showed Maya the image. It was grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Maya climbing into the back of Jun Seo's sleek black SUV while he held the door, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. "Oh God," Maya breathed. "Yeah, oh God is right. You want to explain how you went from 'I'm pathetically obsessed with my scary landlord' to 'he's picking me up for what is obviously a date' in the span of like 3 days." Maya put her head in her hands. "It's complicated, uncomplicated. Now, I'm your best friend and I deserve details." So Maya told her, not everything, some things were too private, too intense to share, but the broad strokes, the accidental text, his arrival at her door, the night that followed, and the conversation after. Keisha listened with increasingly wide eyes. "Let me get this straight," she said when Maya finished. "You accidentally sent the horniest text in the history of horniness to the actual Korean Mafia boss who owns our building. And instead of having you killed, he showed up at your apartment and basically rearranged your internal organs. And now you're dating. I don't know if dating is the right word. What would you call it?" Maya considered. "Intense mutual interest with undefined parameters." "That's the most you thing you've ever said." Keisha shook her head slowly. "Girl, do you understand what you've gotten yourself into? That man is dangerous, like actually dangerous. The kind of dangerous that ends up in FBI investigations and bodies in the river." "I know. Do you really?" Keisha leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because I've heard stories about him. Everyone in this building has. He runs half the organized crime in this city. He has people killed for crossing him. He's not some misunderstood bad boy with a heart of gold. He's a monster." The word hit Maya harder than she expected. A monster. Is that what Jun Seo was? She thought about his hands, gentle on her face, his laugh, surprised and genuine, the vulnerability in his eyes when he talked about letting her go if she wanted to leave. "Maybe he is," she said slowly. "Maybe he's done terrible things, but he's also a person. A complicated person who showed me more honesty in one night than some men have shown me in entire relationships. Honesty doesn't make up for murder. I don't know what he's done, not specifically. I told him I wanted to understand his world, but we haven't had that conversation yet. And when you do, when you find out the specifics, what then?" It was the question Maya had been avoiding, the question that lurked beneath every moment of happiness she had experienced since that night. "I don't know," she admitted. "I guess I'll have to decide then." Keisha studied her for a long moment. "You really like him, don't you? Not just the excitement or the danger or the sex. You actually like the person." "I barely know the person, but what I've seen," Maya trailed off, trying to find the right words. "He makes me feel seen, Keisha, really seen, like he's looking at me instead of through me. And he's been honest with me from the start about what he is and what he can offer, which is complication, danger, but also protection, devotion, a chance to be part of something bigger than my small, ordinary life. And that's worth the risk." Maya thought about it, really thought about it. "Ask me again in a month. Right now, all I know is that I don't want to walk away." Keisha sighed heavily. "Fine, I'll support you. That's what friends do. But I'm also going to worry about you constantly, and if he does anything to hurt you, I'm telling my cousin Darius, and that man is scary enough to maybe give even a crime lord pause." Despite everything, Maya laughed. "Noted. Now finish your lunch. You have a meeting in 20 minutes and you look like you haven't slept in days." "I haven't really. I don't want to know." Keisha stood. "But for what it's worth, you're glowing. Whatever else is happening, you look happier than I've seen you in years." It was true, Maya realized as she watched her friend walk away. Despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, despite the whispers and stares and the very real danger lurking at the edges of her new reality, she did feel happier. For the first time in a long time, she felt alive. The dinner Jun Seo had promised happened that Friday. He picked her up in the same black SUV that had been photographed, though this time they went to a private garage first to switch vehicles, a precaution, he explained, against anyone tracking their movements. The restaurant was not what she expected. Instead of some flashy, high-profile establishment, he took her to a small Korean restaurant in a neighborhood she had never visited. Sign was in Korean characters, the interior modest and warm, the few other diners looking like regulars who had been coming there for years. "My grandmother brought me here when I was a child," Junseo explained as they were seated in a private room at the back. "The owner is the grandson of the woman who started this place. He doesn't know who I am. To him, I'm just a customer who comes in every few months and always orders too much food. You wanted to show me a place where you're normal. I wanted to show you a piece of who I was before I became what I am." He studied the menu, though Maya suspected he had it memorized. "You asked to know who Jun Seo is when he's not being terrifying. The answer is complicated, but this place is part of it. They ordered, he insisted on choosing the dishes, promising she would love everything, and as the food arrived in a steady stream of small plates and steaming bowls, he began to talk. He told her about his grandmother, a fierce woman who had raised him after his parents died in what was officially a car accident, but which he later learned was an assassination ordered by a rival family. He told her about inheriting the business at 22, too young and too unprepared, forced to become ruthless just to survive. He told her about the choices he had made, the lines he had crossed, the pieces of himself he had sacrificed to build his empire. He did not sanitize it. He did not make excuses, he simply laid out his history like a map, showing her the terrain she was choosing to enter. I have killed people, he said quietly, his eyes never leaving her face. Not often, not casually, but when it was necessary to protect my organization or the people I care about, I have done what needed to be done. And you don't regret it? I regret that the world requires such choices. I regret that I was born into a life where violence was the only language that kept me alive, but regretting the actions themselves, he shook his head. Regret is a luxury for people who had other options. Maya processed this. It was exactly as bad as she had feared and somehow different than she had imagined. The people you dealt with, were they innocent? Define innocent. He took a sip of his drink. Were they uninvolved civilians who stumbled into something they shouldn't have? No, never. I have rules about that, hard lines that I don't cross, but were they blameless? That's more complicated. They were people who chose to enter my world, people who knew the stakes, people who tried to harm me or mine and discovered the consequences. So it's not random violence, it's occupational hazard. In a way, he leaned forward. I'm not asking you to accept what I do, Maya. I'm not asking you to approve or participate or pretend you're comfortable with it. I'm simply telling you the truth so you can make an informed choice about whether to stay. And if I can't accept it, then I drive you home and never contact you again. His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. It would hurt, more than I want to admit, but I would rather lose you now than watch you grow to hate me later because you didn't understand what you were signing up for. Maya looked at the spread of food between them. Traditional dishes made with care, served in a place that held memories of a grandmother's love. She looked at the man across from her, this contradiction wrapped in an expensive suit, capable of terrible things but also capable of vulnerability and honesty that took her breath away. I need time, she finally said. He nodded slowly. Take all the time you need. But Junseo, yes, I'm not running, not yet. She reached across the table and took his hand. I'm scared, I'm confused. I don't know if I can reconcile what you've told me with what I feel when I look at you, but I'm not ready to give up on figuring it out. His fingers intertwined with hers, squeezing gently. That's more than I expected, more than I deserve. Probably, she offered a small smile. Now teach me how to eat whatever that is because it smells amazing and I have no idea what I'm doing. The tension broke. He laughed, that warm, surprised sound she was learning to crave, and began explaining each dish with the enthusiasm of someone sharing something precious. The night continued with easier conversation, lighter topics, glimpses of the normal person beneath the crime lord exterior. She learned that he read voraciously, mostly history and philosophy, that he had a weakness for terrible action movies, that he could speak 5 languages fluently and was teaching himself a 6th just to stay sharp. She learned that he was lonely, not in the way he said it, he never would have admitted it directly, but in the spaces between his words, in the way his eyes lit up when she asked questions, in the almost desperate attention he paid to every detail of her responses. This was a man surrounded by people but truly known by none of them. Until now, maybe. Until her stupid, accidental text had crashed through his carefully maintained isolation and given him permission to reach out. He drove her home himself that night, dismissing his driver, something she was coming to understand was unusual. At her door, he kissed her softly without the urgency of their first night. Same time next week, he asked. Are you asking me on a second date? I believe I am. Then yes. She kissed him again, lingering. But you're meeting me somewhere public next time. I want to show you off. His eyebrows rose. Show me off. Keisha thinks you're a monster. I want her to see you being charming over coffee. You want to introduce me to your friend? That's what people do when they're dating, isn't it? Something shifted in his expression, a softening that made him look younger, almost vulnerable. I suppose it is. The next Saturday brunch, be charming or face my disappointment. I would rather face a room full of assassins than your disappointment. Good answer. She stepped inside. Good night, Junseo. Good night, Maya. She closed the door and leaned against it, her heart racing, her mind spinning with everything she had learned and everything still to discover. This was insane. She was insane, but she had never felt more certain that she was exactly where she wanted to be. The weeks that followed were a strange dance of normality and danger. Maya continued working at her job, though she noticed that certain problems mysteriously resolved themselves and certain coworkers who had been difficult suddenly became cooperative. She didn't ask Junseo about it directly, but she suspected his influence was at work. She saw him regularly dinners, brunches with Keisha, who remained suspicious but admitted he was unexpectedly personable, quiet evenings at his penthouse where they talked for hours about everything and nothing. The physical dimension of their relationship remained intense. Jun Seo was insatiable, and Maya discovered depths of desire in herself that she hadn't known existed. But it was the emotional intimacy that surprised her most. The way he listened when she talked about her childhood, her dreams, her fears. The way he opened up in return, sharing pieces of himself that she suspected he had never told anyone. She met some of his people. His second in command, a stoic man named Park Min-jun who clearly disapproved of her but respected his boss too much to say so directly. His personal assistant, a sharp woman named Yoon Jae-yeon who seemed to warm to Maya after observing her interactions with Jun Seo. A few others, carefully selected, who treated her with deference that bordered on reverence. They think you're good for me, Jun Seo explained when she commented on it. They've watched me become softer since you entered my life, less rigid, more human. Is that a good thing in your world? It's a vulnerability, but some of them believe it's worth the risk. Hold her closer. I believe it's worth the risk. 2 months after that first accidental text, Maya had almost convinced herself that this could work, that she could carve out a space in his world without being consumed by it. That love, because she was fairly certain that was what this was becoming, could survive even in the shadow of violence and danger. Then the attack came. It happened on a Thursday evening. Maya was leaving the office late, having stayed to finish a project that was due the next morning. The parking garage was mostly empty, her footsteps echoing off the concrete walls as she walked toward her car. She didn't notice the van until it was too late. It came around the corner fast, tires squealing, and before she could react, the side door slid open and hands were grabbing her, pulling her inside. She screamed, fought, kicked at everything she could reach, but there were too many of them, too strong, something pressed against her face, a cloth with a sickly sweet smell. The world went fuzzy then. She woke in pain, her head was pounding, her wrists were bound behind her, and she was sitting on a cold concrete floor in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Cliché, some detached part of her brain noted, bad guys always use abandoned warehouses. 2 men stood by the door, speaking in Russian. A third paced nearby, checking his phone with increasing agitation. She's awake, one of them said, noticing her eyes opening. The pacer walked over, crouching to look at her face. He was middle-aged, with cold eyes and a scar that twisted across his left cheek. Miss Johnson, good of you to join us. His English was accented but clear. You're a difficult woman to acquire. Kang's security is impressive, but not perfect. What do you want? Her voice came out hoarse. What everyone wants, leverage. He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Your boyfriend has something that belongs to my employer. We're going to convince him to give it back. I don't know anything about his business. I can't help you. You misunderstand. He pulled out a phone and began dialing. You don't need to know anything. You just need to bleed. Maya's blood went cold. The phone connected. A moment of silence. Then Jun Seo's voice, colder than she had ever heard it. Who is this? Mr. Kang. We haven't met, but I believe we have mutual interests. Specifically, I have something of yours. The man held the phone toward Maya. Say hello. Jun Seo, her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful. The phone was pulled away before she could finish. As you can hear, she's alive for now. The man's voice was pleasant, conversational. We'd like to keep her that way, but that depends entirely on you. What do you want? Jun Seo's voice was ice. The Volkov shipment, all of it, delivered to coordinates I will provide within 6 hours. In exchange, you get your woman back mostly intact. And if I refuse, then we return her to you in pieces, starting with the parts you probably enjoy most. Silence on the line. Maya's heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. If you touch her, Jun Seo finally said, each word precise and deadly, there is no corner of this world where you will be safe. I will find you. I will find everyone you have ever loved, and I will make you watch while I destroy them before I finally let you die. The man actually flinched. For a moment, uncertainty flickered in his cold eyes, then he recovered. Big words from a man who let us take his woman from under his nose. 6 hours, Mr. Kang. The coordinates will follow. He ended the call. Tie her more securely, he ordered his men. And gag her. I don't want to hear any more noise. The next hours were the worst of Maya's life. She sat in that cold warehouse, bound and gagged, watching her captors grow increasingly nervous as time passed. They checked their phones constantly, argued in hushed Russian. One of them kept looking at her with an expression she didn't want to interpret. She thought about Jun Seo, about the cold fury in his voice, about whether he would actually give up whatever the Volkov shipment was, which sounded valuable and probably illegal in exchange for her safety. She thought about what would happen if he didn't, and she thought about the fact that this was exactly what Keisha had warned her about. That being with a man like Jun Seo meant becoming a target. That love came with a price, and she might be about to pay it in blood. The attack came 90 minutes before the deadline. There was no warning. One moment, the warehouse was quiet except for the nervous muttering of her captors. The next moment, the lights went out and the world exploded into violence. Gunfire, screaming, the sounds of bodies hitting concrete and men dying in the dark. Maya pressed herself against the wall, making herself as small as possible, praying that she wouldn't be hit by stray bullets. Then a flashlight beam found her face and a familiar voice said, I've got her, she's alive. Jun Seo's second in command. He cut her bonds and helped her to her feet just as the lights flickered back on, revealing a warehouse that now resembled a war zone, bodies everywhere, blood pooling on the concrete. And in the center of it all, Junseo, holding a gun that still smoked. He saw her and something in his expression shattered. In 3 strides he was across the room, the gun discarded, his arms wrapping around her so tightly she could barely breathe. Maya, Maya, he said her name like a prayer, his voice raw. I thought I lost you. When they called, when I heard your voice, I'm okay, she managed, though she was trembling violently. I'm okay, you came. I will always come for you. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, checking for injuries. Did they hurt you? Just some bruises. They were saving the hurting for later. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in her throat. They wanted to send you pieces of me. Junseo's expression went terrifyingly blank. He turned to look at the bodies on the floor. Which one? Junseo. Which one made that threat? Maya pointed to the man with the scar, who was groaning weakly on the floor, clearly wounded but not yet dead. Junseo walked over, picked up his discarded gun, and stood over the man. Wait, Maya said. He paused but didn't turn around. I know what you're going to do. I know he deserves it, but she swallowed hard. I don't want to watch. I've seen enough tonight. For a long moment, Junseo was still. Then he handed the gun to Minjun. Get her out of here. Take her to the penthouse. Dr. Lee should examine her. And him? Minjun asked, nodding toward the wounded man. I'll handle him personally after I know she's safe. Minjun nodded and gently took Maya's arm. This way, Miss Johnson. She let herself be led away, looking back once to see Junseo crouching beside the scarred man, speaking in a voice too low to hear. She didn't want to know what happened next, but she could imagine. The aftermath was complicated. Maya spent 2 days at Junseo's penthouse under guard at all times while Dr. Lee checked her repeatedly and Junseo dealt with whatever business the attack had stirred up. When he finally returned to her properly, he looked exhausted in ways she had never seen. It's over, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed where she lay. The Volkovs won't bother you again. They won't bother anyone again. You destroyed them. Their Chicago operation, yes. He looked at his hands. They made a mistake targeting you. They thought you were a weakness. They didn't understand that you're the reason I fight harder, the reason I can't afford to lose. Maya reached out and took his hand. What happens now? Now you decide. His voice was heavy. I told you once that if you wanted out, I would let you go. That offer stands. What happened to you is exactly what you were afraid of, exactly what I was afraid of. I can't promise it won't happen again. Can you promise to keep coming for me? Every time, without hesitation, without limit. Then I'm staying. He looked at her sharply. Maya, I'm staying. She pulled him closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. I was terrified in that warehouse. I thought I was going to die. And do you know what I kept thinking about? Not my job, not my apartment, not the life I had before you. I kept thinking about all the things I wanted to tell you, all the moments we hadn't had yet, all the future we might never get. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she kept talking. I don't want to give up that future because I'm afraid. I'd rather have 1 year with you really living than 50 years of safety and loneliness. So yes, I'm staying, not because I'm naive, not because I don't understand the risks, but because you're worth the risk to me. Junseo was silent for a long moment. Then he was kissing her, desperate and grateful and reverent all at once. I love you, he said against her lips. I should have told you before, I love you, Maya, completely, irrevocably, in ways I didn't know I was capable of. I love you too, she wrapped her arms around him. Even when you're terrifying, especially when you're terrifying. He laughed and there was wetness on his cheeks that she pretended not to notice. We're going to have rules, he said, security protocols, people with you at all times until I'm certain there are no remaining threats. Okay, and you need to learn to defend yourself. Basic training at minimum. I know people who can teach you. Okay, and you should probably move in here. The penthouse has security that your apartment doesn't. Are you asking me to move in with you? He paused, seeming to realize what he had just said. Yes, I suppose I am. Maya pretended to consider it. I don't know, that's a big step. We've only been dating for 2 months. People might talk. People already talk. You're the girlfriend of the most feared man in Chicago. I think your reputation is thoroughly compromised. True, she kissed him softly. Okay, I'll move in, but I'm bringing my entire book collection and I refuse to let you organize them by color. Who organizes books by color? Monsters, that's who. He laughed again, and she realized that she had never heard him laugh this much before, that despite everything, the kidnapping, the violence, the very real brush with death, there was joy in this moment. They had survived. They had chosen each other. And whatever came next, they would face it together. 1 year later, Maya stood on the balcony of the penthouse that had become her home, watching the sun set over Chicago. So much had changed since that accidental text message. She had changed. The naive woman who had sent that message felt like a different person entirely, someone from another life. She was stronger now, trained in self-defense, aware of her surroundings in ways that had become second nature. She understood Junseo's world, had become a part of it in ways that sometimes surprised her. Not the violence that remained his domain, but the strategy, the alliances, the careful chess game that kept his empire running. She had found her place, not as a passive participant, but as a partner. Her background in marketing had proven surprisingly useful in the legitimate side of his business. She had ideas, perspectives, approaches that complemented his own, and through it all, their love had deepened. It wasn't the whirlwind passion of those first months, though that remained. It was something steadier now, the comfortable intimacy of shared mornings and inside jokes, the security of knowing someone had your back without question, the profound peace of being truly known and truly loved, arms wrapped around her from behind. "You're thinking too loudly," Junseo murmured against her hair. "I'm thinking about how weird my life is." Weird. A year ago, I was a marketing coordinator with a crush and a non-existent social life. Now I'm living in a penthouse with a crime lord who looks at me like I hung the moon. "You did hang the moon." He turned her to face him. "My world was dark before you stumbled into it with your accidental text and your terrible judgment." "Hey, my judgment isn't terrible. I picked you, didn't I? That's the terrible judgment I was referring to." She swatted his arm. He caught her hand and kissed her palm. "I have something for you," he said. "If it's another bodyguard, I already have 3. It's not a bodyguard." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Maya's heart stopped. "Junseo, I know we haven't discussed this. I know it's complicated given who I am and what I do. And I know that marriage in my world comes with expectations and dangers that aren't fair to ask anyone to accept." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple and elegant, with a single diamond that caught the fading light. "But I'm asking anyway, because I can't imagine my future without you in it. Because every good thing in my life traces back to that ridiculous message you sent. Because you make me better than I am, and I want to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." Maya stared at the ring, then at the man holding it. This man who had terrified her and captivated her, who had shown her violence and tenderness, who had risked everything to save her and offered her the chance to walk away. This man who loved her in ways that defied logic and reason. "Yes," she said, his eyes widened. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll accept all the complications and dangers. Yes, I'll spend the rest of my life making you prove you deserve me." He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. "I was prepared for you to say no. I had a whole speech about respecting your decision." "Maybe work on your proposals then." She pulled him into a kiss. "For the record, this is officially the second best accidental decision I've ever made. Second, the first was sending that text." She grinned against his lips. "Best mistake of my life." He laughed, and the sound was pure joy. They stood there as the sun finished setting, two people who had found each other against all odds, holding onto a future that shouldn't have been possible. Sometimes the wrong number is exactly right. Sometimes a mistake leads you exactly where you need to be. Sometimes love finds you in the most unexpected ways, crashing through your careful plans and rewriting your entire story. Maya had learned that lesson in the most dramatic way possible. And as she stood in the arms of the man she was going to marry, watching night fall over the city that had become their kingdom, she knew she wouldn't change a single thing. Not the fear, not the danger, not the violence or the complications or the impossible odds. Because all of it had led her here, to him, to home. The most unexpected loves are often the deepest. The most accidental connections often become the most permanent, and sometimes the message you never meant to send carries exactly the words someone needed to hear. Maya's mistake had become her destiny, and Kang Jun-seo, the most feared man in Chicago, had finally found something worth more than all his power and money combined. He had found her. And he would spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted sending that ridiculous, wonderful, life-changing text.